Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hylke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Well, welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I am your host, Hylke Faber, and I'm here today with Dr. Laura Hamill, a renowned author of The Power of Culture, also a very seasoned leader. Laura, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing? So nice to be with you.
It is wonderful to be with you, and I'm very grateful to be in your presence. We'll learn a little bit more about Laura in a moment. And as we do at the outset of every Root and Unwavering podcast, this is number 64. We have a moment to reflect on why even have this conversation in this context of Root and Unwavering. And to the context of Root and Unwavering is to connect more deeply to our core, our center. And as I reflect on this towards the end of 2025, I've witnessed what the power of that is when we do that together. I witnessed the power of that, of teams, and the beauty that happens when we all are coming from this really deeply, deeply honest and deeply, deeply kind place. Conversations flow easily, things get done easily. Obstacles are not things to be scared of, but things to actually walk toward together. And we know that we can walk together toward and through anything. And I think in today's days, that's probably also important for at least me to remember that we are not alone. The paradox of connectedness is that it starts not outside, but it starts within us. And that's what part of this podcast is about, to remind ourselves, to take a moment of, like, how connected am I? Not just in my mind, but just in my body. I spent a lot of my life up in my head, and I'm slowly finding my way into my body. And I know that changes the way I lead, I coach, and I'm a husband and friend. And I think that changes the tone of voice when we do that. So I invite us to, in this conversation, to see what we can learn from the conversation with Laura Hamill. Laura comes to us with a tremendous background. She was a very senior leader at Microsoft and then also a co-founder of Limeade. She's written a book with the Economist called The Power of Culture, and she lives in Woodinville, Washington with her husband, 2 children, and a golden retriever. Dr. Laura Hamill is an organizational psychologist and business leader focusing on the intersection of science and human resources, and is an expert on creating great places to work, and is the owner of Paris Phoenix Group, a consulting firm that specializes in forming and transforming culture. I've had a conversation with Laura before we had this podcast, and one of the things that I enjoy about the conversation with Laura is that I find this intersection between deep honesty and also a lot of practical strength. How do you scale this and make results happen in a deeply humane way? Welcome, Laura. Laura, tell us about what you have learned about connectedness in your life and leadership.
Well, first, thanks so much for having me. And I just love the way you introduced that. That was so beautiful. There's so many things that come to mind when I think about the idea of connectedness. And so I've got some things that I wanted to share with you about that. But I think one of the things you just said made me think about something else. I think that part that you were talking about around connecting with our bodies, that is, and getting kind of out of our heads and connecting more. That has been something for me that has been such a journey, I guess you could say, or like something that I feel like I'm just starting to discover is
Mm.
how to do that. And I just see so much value in it. So I love that you bring that up. And I just think it's really a special thing for each person to figure out what that means for themselves. But the connectedness piece, I feel like there's some interesting leadership examples that I have of that. And I'd say the biggest one that comes to mind for me is when you mentioned that I was a co-founder of a company called Limeade. And so we started that company in 2006. And it was just an idea we had. We wanted to create a software company that helped focus on well-being. And this was before COVID. This was before well-being was even something people spoke about. And it was something that I knew from a research and science perspective was really important. And so I worked with a couple other people and we created this company, and we went from an idea to 375 employees. We went public, and that whole experience was like a masterclass to me in connectedness,
Mm.
because I learned about like connections I had with the other co-founders and how great that could be, but also how painful those connections can be, and how how like deeply rooted they can be, and when things are hard or things don't go well, the impact of that. So
Mm.
but I think the thing that comes to mind, that's the most proud of, is the idea of connecting with the people in the company. When the way we were trying to build an organization where we were actually internally doing the things that we were telling everybody else to do externally, that
Mhm.
we're telling our customers. So a real focus on well-being internally, and a focus on, how we would create a company where we wanted to work.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. There were a lot of
Yeah.
challenges to that. And that connection that we slowly built over time is something that I look back on now and I'm the most proud of. When there were some different, really specific ways that played out. I remember being at an all hands once, and I was doing a standing in front of everybody, and the energy that I was getting and the love from everybody that I was receiving. We were talking about something that was about the company and work related, but it was magical, right? Like
Mm.
I felt it in the air. And to be part of that, right? To be part of helping to create that, but also like receiving that,
Mm.
was the just one of the highlights of my career, is to have that kind of feeling. So
Mm.
that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in organizational culture, because I feel that culture is a mechanism for that connectedness, a
Mm.
way, and it's not easy, it's hard, but a way to actually do that, to
Mm.
create that.
Mm.
So I think that I've had lots of different ways that connectedness has been important, but I'd say probably that example is one of the most important ones for me.
I can imagine you standing in front of that room or with that room with those people and sensing that in the air. Tell us about this, Laura. So you have experienced, like most human beings, or maybe all of them, all of us, this sense of connectedness and disconnectedness. So maybe tell us a little bit about uh, how you connected to this idea of even forming a company, because that is
Hmm.
not something that all of us easily jump into. So
Yeah.
how did it come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I had just left a big job in a big company, and I was starting my own consulting practice. And my kids were little at the time. And really, I had pretty low expectation. I just wanted to be with them. Like I wanted to be able to have dinner with them. That was kind of the main reason why I had left this other job, because it was a great job on paper. And so the one of the co-founders reached out to me and said he had an idea. And I didn't have anything to lose, right? I want to get together with people. And
Mhm.
so I left this big job. I don't have this big community anymore. And so why not just get together with him? And so we got together, and it was supposed to be like an hour meeting at Starbucks. We were there for almost 3 hours talking. We just had so much fun talking to each other. And so he had left a big job too. And so both of us were just really like, I guess that's a great example of connecting, right? We were just deeply connecting on the topic of corporate America and the opportunity for there to be so much more meaning and so much more purpose and so much opportunity to treat people like human beings. And what can we do with that? And so as I'm saying this out loud, I mean, that really was a real connection point. And he and I both, like, intellectually really connected. And I think also um like from the passion of the idea and the passion of the possibilities,
Mhm.
he and
Mhm.
I connected with each other. So then it just snowballed from there. There's all kinds of funny stories of how we would just get together. I'd bring research articles and books, and I would tell him what I'm learning, and we would have a generative conversation about, we could do this and we could do that. We could build it in this way, and it just started to like form.
Mhm.
And there's kind of a funny story where we would go to Bellevue Public Library, which is near Seattle, and that's where we would meet a lot because we wanted to talk about our research, and it was longer than Starbucks kind of conversation. And when we were doing that, there was a sign on the door that said no startups. So this was in 2006, that the public library had to say no startups in, right outside of
That's right.
Seattle. I know. So anyway, we just started working on it, and it took a long time, right? It took years, and he and then another co-founder did a lot of the heavy lifting around raising money, and actually starting to make this be a real company. But yeah, it was connectedness, I think, and curiosity, I think, also
Mhm.
were the
Yes.
things that kind of were driving why we were so into the topic and so
Mm.
excited about getting together, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. I sense that sense of curiosity is very germane to who you are. Is that fair?
Yeah. Um, I, I think so. Like I get curious about many topics and read. I like to read a lot.
Uh-huh.
And every time I read, it just opens up another idea and
Yes,
another idea,
yes.
right? And especially, I mean, journal articles. And in this day and age where everything's summarized, in Perplexity or Chat GPT, actually reading a journal article, I almost always think, oh, you could do this, and there's this extension, and you could think about it in this way. So for me, reading is like a way that I really get that feeling of
Amazing.
possibility.
Amazing. Amazing. So tell us about your journey a little bit more because we've talked about actually the great things you've been able to do. And I'm curious about, you also let us know along the way that it wasn't always easy. So
Yeah,
maybe we zoom in on that for a second, because
sure.
most of us know, like, we know what good looks like, or some of us know what good looks like, if we are lucky enough, right?
Right.
And many of us are get maybe stuck sometimes in that place of where things are not going so well. So maybe can
Yeah.
you think of an example, maybe in Limeade or other places, and you can keep it, of course, confidential, where you felt somewhat disconnected with
Yeah.
yourself, with others, and maybe take us into that movie, like what was going
Yeah.
on, and
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
did you feel, and how did you work with that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you say that, right? Because I think that it's easy to think that everything just comes to some people, right? That just all these beautiful things happen back to back to back, and there's no struggle. Of course, there's struggle, right? Everybody struggles, and um, and disconnection. Absolutely, I have so many examples, but one of the things that for me was really foundational is how I grew up. My parents were hippies, and we lived on 60 acres of land. I helped to build our house. We built a log cabin. We had no electricity. I grew up, from, I guess it was basically third grade until I went to college without having electricity. And that was a struggle. And, there was a lot that was really cool about growing up that way, growing up on 60 acres. I mean, beautiful land and a river. And I read, like getting back to the reading thing, that's what I read and read and read and read, because we had a television that hooked to the car battery, and it only lasted an hour before it wore the car battery down. So I only could watch like an hour of TV, and we didn't pick up any channels either, right? So it was kind of a wasted effort. And so that growing up like that was really hard. And on top of that, we were really poor. And so I didn't feel very connected to the community that I grew up in. Nobody was like me. Everybody else had electricity. Everybody else had money. Everybody else kind of went to church and, did the thing. And I grew up in the South in North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
So it was really, really hard. And as I look back, I think a lot of this desire to achieve and to do well in school and to get a good job is really rooted in not feeling connected. Like, I'm going to do everything that I can that I thought would make that connection happen, or that sense of, feeling safe probably,
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And that was really, really hard. And that was a real struggle. But also something that I'm quite proud of too. That's what's so hard about some of these things. The things that are the hardest things you go through can often be the things that you look back on and say, I'm the most proud of that. So there's been different times. Maybe one other example that comes to mind is...
Stay
go ahead.
with this one for a second,
Yeah, for
because
sure.
I'm very curious about being on these 60 acres, and because you could argue like, wow, there is somebody who's really connected to their family, to nature, and all that. And like, I'm a secret little jealous. I grew up on a dairy farm, we had electricity and a lot of cows, a very different situation, right? But I'm listening like, wow, that sounds so idyllic. And yet I also heard from you, there was a sense of disconnectedness there. What tell us about that.
Yeah, I think the connection, what's beautiful is I always felt really loved by my family. So I think that's what a wonderful thing, right? So I definitely felt that connection there. But and also the nature thing's interesting, because now I purposely wanted to live somewhere where we had more space. It's still kind of in the Seattle suburbs, but we have almost 3 acres and I see trees everywhere around me. And I think it's back to the way I grew up and that connection. And I had no trouble walking a couple miles like down our road at night by myself when I was little. Like that was very normal to me. We didn't have any light besides flashlights, right? So, but like I would just sit in the river. I'd tie up my inner tube with my book and sit in the river, trying really hard not to get my book wet, like there were so many ways that connection with nature, I think, is a huge, it's so deep in me that I don't even, like, when you say that, I'm like, whoa, yeah. I mean, that's very true. So I did have those connections are really great ones, beautiful ones, right? I think it was just more, I didn't feel connected with my peers. I didn't feel connected with the people I went to school with. I didn't feel kind of connected with who am I in this community, and what am I going to be, So there was a lot of that was hard.
Yes. And that was hard. And then I heard you that you then chose a path of high achievement to forge that connection.
Yes.
And what did you discover in the process?
Or you know where this is going. Like, well, first of all, I completely believed that if I work really hard, right? And it's my effort was what this was associated with, right? If I work really hard and I kind of obtain the highest degree, so I went right straight from undergrad to a PhD program, right? If I get the highest degree possible, then my life will be great, right? That's all I have to do. And obviously that's not the case, right?
How did you learn?
We have to,
How did you learn that? Because it could, for
well,
some people, it might be the case, at least for a long time.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot that comes with that is positive, right? A lot of doors get opened when you do well in school and then you get a really great job. There's a lot of possible opportunities, right, that
Yeah,
happen.
yeah,
But there's also a lot of kind of realization about achievement and what the emptiness that can
Mm.
also come from that. Like, all your problems don't get solved when you get a really good job. All your problems don't get solved when you make more money than you ever thought you were going to make, right? Like, that is I'm working on that all the time now. I mean, I was talking to my therapist yesterday about it, just how much that kind of drive to keep doing more is something that never really gets fulfilled, right? It never is enough. And I know it's so cliche, but like, that is something that I have been working on for a really long time, is how do the term rooted of your podcast really hit me right when I was thinking about our time together, the rooted piece, and how do I stay rooted and come back to being rooted in just being me and not feeling like I'm all my achievements, right?
yeah, yeah. And I love that you talked about the drive, and I resonate with that. You're looking at one,
Yeah.
and then also the emptiness of it. Oh,
Yeah.
I turned 53 last year, so I'm almost for 54. Oops. And yeah, the achievements and the bank account and the stuff is not filling it up. It's not
Right.
doing it.
Right.
And so, let's take this to leadership for a moment, because that
Yeah.
sense of not enough or never enough can be a powerful driver for a leader,
Yes.
right?
And in cultures, like, there are cultures that sort of thrive on that building this expectation that you are never quite enough. So keep proving to me, keep showing me
Yeah.
that you are more. And the cycle that creates in a culture as well, right? So if we think about that at the individual level as a person going through and having that feeling, but also cultures that propagate that and that reinforce that feeling that many of us have of like, you should want more here, and if you just do a little bit more, then maybe we might see that, maybe we might recognize that, maybe you will get promoted. That feeling is that treadmill of never getting off of that is completely soul crushing, right? Like, you just can't keep doing that.
And yet we
So yeah.
keep doing it, don't we? Right?
Yes. Well, we're trying, right? We're trying not to keep doing it.
Uh-huh.
I think the recognition of it and the kind of signs of it. To me, what I'm working a lot on is, am I doing more things for myself that are building me up, that are good for me, that are helping me, than things that are depleting me and bringing things down.
Mhm.
So that's really my goal, and it's a daily thing, right? It's in a given day. That's how I think
Mhm.
about it. What are the things I'm doing for myself today, and
Mm.
how am I doing more things that are filling me up than
Mm.
depleting me? And it's daily daily
Yes,
struggle.
yes. And so I love this tension, right, between maybe it's time to get off the rat race, and
Yeah.
maybe we are enough already.
Yeah.
And then there are some of us who are still leading organizations
Right.
where that current of always needing to grow, heck, it's fueled in the stock market. We have to
Yeah.
grow our companies, right? We all are in this frame of mind that our share price has to go up for our savings. So there's like a whole mindset around it. So how does one, what do you like, if you were to speak to your somewhat younger self when you were leading Limeade, like if you were looking at her then, and just if you look at her with your current eyes, what would you see in her, and maybe not enough, and what would you say to her?
Yeah. There was so much that I feel like we were doing right and that was good that I don't think we appreciated it at the time.
Ah,
Do you know what I mean? Like I think that's being self-critical, thinking, more. And to your point, every quarter having increasing expectations from our board around how, what revenue would look like. And it was just once you saw that for a couple of years and you realize, oh, this is never gonna end, just the bar always rising. I think that for me, there's so much that was really good. And I feel like if I had just appreciated that a little bit more in the moment, I did, but not like now I look back and it's like, oh, that was so cool. And that was so much fun. And like there were so many things that were great about that. We had recently a Limeade reunion, which is unusual, right? For like to want to all get together.
yeah.
And that's what we were talking about. It's like, wow, all the places we've gone since then, there's a lot of things that are, we would think the grass would be greener, but it wasn't. And there was so much that was fun and great about that. So I guess what I'd say to myself is enjoy that a little bit more.
Yes.
Just not be like so worried about the next thing.
Yeah.
And just be in the moment. And that's so, again, a little cliche of being in the moment, but it's like being in the moment and having some fun, like just kind of like feel like how cool this is that we get to do this,
Yeah. Beautifully said. That's that sense of appreciation of what you're doing today, and all these wisdoms are so cliche and yet hard to practice, right?
Yes.
The demands on managers, I work with a lot of them, they are high. And I see some CEOs who have this smile on their face. They're like in that place, I think, that you're speaking about.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I like this surf. Like, I like being on this surfboard. Ooh, this is cool.
Yeah.
And many of us have this tendency of worrying about not being able to do it. We're going to take a short break in a moment. I would love for you to maybe after the break talk a little bit about where that worry maybe took you sometimes and how you have learned to work with that. And maybe also talk a bit more about those interactions with colleagues when things were disconnected and how you moved through them. So you've been listening to a conversation with Dr. Laura Hamill from the Paris Phoenix Group about connectedness. And the conversation we're just having is about how do we stay in this place of appreciation and enoughness while we're doing also hard things and we have expectations on us. And this is not a show with here's the answer. This is a conversation. Let's be in discretion for a moment. What's possible? With a lot of empathy and compassion, because the system that we are in, it's interesting. We didn't design the system where there has to be this eternal growth. It's here. This is where we are. So how do we interact with this situation? You've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. We see you after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. So, Laura, tell us a bit more about those times where that disconnectedness was just having you, and that not enoughness was having you by the neck. And what did you do with that?
by the neck. So many times I feel like by the neck. That's such a visual, right? There's a really interesting interplay for me around what's going on in my head and what's going on in my body, and thinking that it's also always one or the other,
Mm.
and not seeing how much it's both. Because as I look back on different really hard things in my career and in my life, it's always been both. And what I mean by that is, when I left a big tech job that I had two little kids, and the physical, I mean, it was all about mom, and all about, they needed me physically, they needed me around. And I was just, I think, emotionally depleted and physically depleted. And that's when I decided to leave my job. Right. And so there's another time where I had a big time where I left a job, and it was when I was starting to go through menopause. And so having that going on in my body, but thinking that it was all like things I was frustrated with and things that I hated about my job, but it was both. And that's something that I feel like I've really learned to listen to a little bit more and pay attention to, is that it's, there is that worry, but the worry doesn't get, that it doesn't get helped when the rest of your body isn't feeling great either, and how much those things work hand in hand. So I big times where I've made big career changes, there's almost always been a both going on, stuff in my head and stuff going on in my body. I just thought I kind of mentioned that because the menopause thing has been a big thing for me personally, of like, I'm so glad people are talking about it a lot more, because even just a couple of years ago, it wasn't as much of a conversation. So, but there have been different really hard times where I feel like this striving thing kind of came to a head. And so I thought I'd share an example. This was at Limeade again. We were, a company, to your point about like always having more higher and higher revenue expectations. We had a product that we sold that wasn't ready to be sold. And so instead of like acknowledging that, we sold it. And it was on the backs of our employees. Our employees had to do ridiculous things to try to make this product work. So they were working really late hours, working on the weekends, having to, deal with a customer that was very unhappy about the product. And what I think was putting more, kind of adding fuel to the fire, was us as leaders. We were not sending consistent messages about this product, about the prioritization of the product. And so the people who were working on it were getting really like pulled left and right, whiplash. Do I put everything into this? One leader says I should, another leader says I shouldn't. Like, it was really a bad scene. And to me, it was like a lack of integrity from a leadership perspective of, we've created this problem. We've just kind of given it to employees to figure out. And we are inconsistent about whether or not this matters. And we don't want to talk about it. And so that to me was a real like, oh, this is a pivotal moment for this place that we say we care so much about people and we care so much about culture. And so what I wanted us to do was talk about it as a company. And so I asked some of the employees if they would share with everybody else what happened from their perspective. So I kind of set up the situation, explained from my perspective what happened, and then I had employees talk about how it impacted them. And there's one particular employee that I remember, she just started bawling in front of everybody. We had a week or 2 weeks a year where everybody would come and be together. So this is when everybody was together. And I remember exactly the room we were in. And she just started bawling about how she felt so upset that she couldn't make this thing work And of course she couldn't, right? I mean, this is a much bigger thing than just what one person, and the impact it had on her little babies. And I think she was breastfeeding and like she couldn't because she had to go travel to the customer. It was just a mess. And I guess my point of sharing all that is that, like, I felt, even though that didn't fix everything, but the talking about it to me was at least an acknowledgement of something that wasn't right. And the validation of the experience that people had was a really important thing to do. Now, I think there were some leaders that like were telling me, I'm so glad we did this. We had to do this. But I know there were two who were kind of pissed off that we talked about this, that we brought it up again, that we outed it. And so to me, that's an example. And that happens all the time in corporate, right? These kinds of things that get pushed under the carpet, that never get said, that people don't own up. I mean, there's a lot of people to own up to different components of it. And that just creates this layer of distrust, layer of it being inhumane to me, like that happens over and over and over again in organizations. And that is something that kind of unnecessary distress that we cause.
Yes.
And that to me is such an important thing as we are, trying to do more and more and more to like actually do that kind of like acknowledgement, right? And that kind of work. And so that's just an example of when it didn't go great. But even when it doesn't go great, what you can do, right?
Yes. So I love that example of when striving replaces integrity.
Yes.
And of course, it's human. Everybody has the potential to do that. And many people have the experience of being a driver or participant in that situation.
Yes.
I'm glad you shared it. Now, I'm curious, what was it like for you as a leader, Laura? Because you're part of the leadership team.
Yeah.
You're co-founder. Something in you knows that this product is not ready to be sold, and yet it's sold. So tell us take us back into that movie for a moment. Like, what was going on with Laura? Like, what were you thinking? How did it feel? What was your process to get through that? And where you start?
And the like layer of being in a startup too, right? Like the idea of having this like really optimistic view that we can figure things out, that this is hard. We have challenge after challenge, but if we just sort of related to what I was saying about when I was growing up, right? It's like, if we just work really hard, we can overcome this challenge. And sometimes the challenges are bigger, right, than you actually can overcome, or that there's things that happen that you didn't predict. And so I think that for me, when I was in it, I was probably a full participant in thinking that we could do this, right? Like being optimistic about it. But once it started to show signs that it wasn't working, that's the part where I feel, and I've had this happen to me, leaders who walk away when things are hard or when things aren't going well versus sit in it and own it and be there and say, wow, what did I do to contribute to this, and how can we maybe learn something from this? That's an integrity thing. That to me feels like you have to do that. I remember I had this a really big project that was a whole company project, and in retrospect, right now it feels so tiny, like what happened. But when it happened, this big tool that my team owned crashed, and I remember my leader, she wouldn't talk to me. She walked away from me. She wouldn't even acknowledge me. And that hit me so hard of like, she doesn't want to be associated with something that didn't go well.
Mm.
And to this day, that to me is an example of how not to be a leader.
I love that you say that, and that part of leadership. It's interesting. The word leaderships comes from Middle English "leith," which means to die. So part of leadership is to be
I didn't know
willing to
that.
die your ego, like as I see it. And I don't if I have to look good, I'm not going to be with the not look good situation. And like in this situation, you let us know that things weren't looking good, and you knew it, and it's interesting to talk about the journey, like the startup journey, which I think is also a beautiful, like, incorporations, like this positive mindset. Of course we need that to fuel us to run up that hill, right?
Right.
Oh, I'm going to do this. And then it's the integration of saying, okay, so something's happening right now, and I have to be honest about it. And then what you're saying is, and be willing to sit in it, sit in the mud with the people in it. And as you did that, what did you discover?
I think the biggest thing for me is just I will never forget that feeling of how real people are impacted by decisions that I help to make. And so for me, I feel like it's just given me a bit of a pause and, trying to be realistic about the operational impact of, saying yes to something. Doesn't mean that I still might not say yes, but like really thinking about and having some empathy for how this is actually going to happen, how this is going to work. And if I say yes, then I need to be committed to helping that happen, right? Not just closing my eyes and saying, well, it's not my problem. It
Right.
is, it is my problem.
If I say yes, then I need to be willing to say yes to the no's along the way, and being
Yeah.
able to be with that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I hear from you. And as the fast forward, then you then decided to have this company wide conversation about it. What happened in you that you decided to do that?
Isn't it interesting sometimes how, like, to me, it was so obvious. Like, it was like, we have to do this. We can, there's something about secrets and shame and letting other people feel the shame, like, I don't know, there's just something about it that I felt like needed to be aired and needed to have a conversation. And again, I don't think it's like it was all, oh, we're never going to do that again and everything's perfect now. It's not. I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying, just hearing from people that were impacted and hearing what their experience was. That was what was important, I think. And I feel like some people did learn. I'd learned a ton from that. I think a couple other people did too. Some people didn't. But it felt, and I keep using the word integrity. It just kind of felt like the right thing to do, to talk about something that was hard.
Isn't that a wonderful thing? That, like, integrity has to me has something to do with truth.
Yes.
And when I'm in truth and integrity, it gives a sense of joy, however hard it is, right? It is like, yeah, this is not working.
Yes.
This might not be the right relationship. This might not, what we poured our heart and soul into is actually not working. And there's a sadness about that. And maybe even the regret and maybe shame, which, we can let go, I hope, as soon as possible. But there's a joy in being able to be truthful to each other and saying, I don't know how to do this. And because then we're in reality together. And we're actually
Yes.
connected to reality. That's part of connectedness. We're connected to actually what's going on, as opposed to some mental defense we have about it.
I love the way you just said that. That is exactly right. That connectedness. That's what I felt with the people who were talking, right? It's like, and it like you said, it's not like all positive. It was what they really went through. And that's exactly what I felt by hearing them. And that it just felt real. It felt, I think, the word truth. Right?
Yeah, feels real. That feels real. How does your body feel when you're real?
It doesn't feel shaky. It doesn't, it feels, it does feel rooted, right? If I feel almost physically connected with somebody when I have that, right? There's like this, like leaning toward, and and I think there's so like just it's like a deep listening, right? Like really listening, and how good that feels.
Yeah. I'm getting a little quiet as remembering that and allowing us to feel, and the people that are listening to feel that. And it's so easy to miss, because we can convince ourselves that we are real with each other. But then ask ourselves, on a scale from 1 to 10, how honest am I really?
Yeah.
And being truthful is a really, really high bar.
Yeah.
Really high bar.
Yeah.
So truthfulness, I think it may have something to do with your background in the woods or the rivers when you were growing up. Nature doesn't lie, the book's wet or it's not wet. There's an hour of TV and no more. You can't make that up. It is what it is. And the product is not working. You can talk about it as it is, but it's not, and people are suffering because of it. And you made a decision that wasn't the right decision, and that's okay.
That's right.
You just have to be real about that. That sort of realness that heals, and the other realness we've been talking about is the realness of the rat race, and maybe we are enough already. That.
Yeah. Completely.
So, what would you say to somebody who is in that situation that you may have been in back at Limeade, in that time where the product wasn't ready, and they may feel the pressure? Gotta be positive, gotta perform, gotta grow. Heck, my career, people, my team's career, my relationship is riding on it. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I get the pressure, right? I get that. I get that there's a lot of things that are pushing you in the direction of saying yes to this. And so if you have to say yes, how about getting in front of some of the things that you could probably, if you spent a half an hour, you could probably predict are going to happen, right? Some of the operational issues that are already a problem in your organization, you could probably get in front of them either by, saying, okay, I know we have this gap. What are some things we could brainstorm together around how we might close that gap in advance? Doing some of that kind of work is what I would suggest. And then also saying, hey, leadership team, do you get what we're doing right now? The decision we're making and the implications of that, and what that could mean if this doesn't go well, and how important it is that we are all aligned and on the same page about this decision. And if we do it, then we need to own it. I think there were some things that in retrospect I could have done up front. Of course, everybody's busy. I was busy. There's a lot of excuses and reasons why, but that's what I would suggest to somebody who might be in a similar position. It's like, what could you do as a leader? Because you sort of have this feeling that it's not going to go well. And so what could you do to set it up? Just maybe it still won't be perfect, but maybe it could be a little smoother.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, calling yourself and the people around you to reality. and saying, yeah, we're in the movie of getting this train going on. We're on off the races. Yep. And now let's have a conversation. Let's talk for a moment and think for ourselves. Think for myself for a moment. What are we really doing? Yeah. And what is caring? Well, caring means taking care of some of these issues now that I can anticipate. Caring means I'm going to talk to my senior leadership team about this and saying, and what I hear that also is giving people the freedom to draw their own conclusions. Because one of the mistakes that I've made and that I see people make that I work with is that they don't bring up things because they think that people are not going to agree with them. So like, why bring it up? But then you also don't give people an option.
Right.
To actually look at it.
Completely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's, I think, a lot more, and I again, the pace and the many commitments and the many hats that people are wearing often gets in the way of our ability to kind of take a step back and be able to have these kinds of thoughts and have these kinds of conversations. And so for me, I really appreciate when people actually put a little bit of a pause and say, wait, let's just look at this for a second. I know everybody's busy, but let's just have a conversation about this. And let's talk about it. And let's just make sure that we want to make this decision in this way.
Yeah, I like that little phrase. I know everybody is busy, and let's have a conversation about it. It's almost like a t-shirt. I know everybody's busy in their own thinking.
Yes.
And let's pause and let's ask ourselves, is this true? What is going on? Yeah, what is going on? Yes.
Right.
Laura, I'm very curious because you revealed a little bit about where you are in your life, and you talked about also having worked through or working through menopause, and you have your book. You just published your book, The Power of Culture, in the fall of last year. That's a year ago now. How did that happen, right?
I don't know. I know. That's exactly. I was thinking about that this morning. That just flew by. Yeah.
Yes. So, what do you yearn for in this next stage of your life?
Oh, so it's funny because yearn for is an interesting word. There's a lot that I feel like I don't yearn for, which is, I think, good. Like there's a lot of, I feel really good about a lot of things. I think the yearning is probably, it's that curiosity piece. Like I just having new thoughts and ideas. Like to me, I'm super interested in how AI is going to impact work, right? And how AI is going to impact what it means to be a leader, how AI is going to impact culture, and how culture impacts AI. Like to me, the way that work is evolving, is super interested in. So I think it's the yearning for me is just learning. It's like continuing to be curious about stuff and having like conversations like this. And that's what to me is really important and fun, and kind of gets me going every day.
Yes, the learning and the curiosity, and I hear the enjoyment of that.
Yeah. Yes.
Enjoyment of that. Yeah.
Very much.
It's good. What would you say to somebody who is in this moment feeling like overwhelmed by the rat race? Like, this sounds like a really nice conversation, but you guys have got it easy because you're a decade ahead of me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole got it easy thing. I just want to reiterate, we sort of touched a little bit on this before, but I for sure have had many struggles and many times where I felt like things are super hard and I didn't know the path forward and I didn't know what was going to happen next. So I just don't want people to think that that's, that everything's golden for people all the time. I mean, maybe there are some people who but not me. Like I have had many times of struggling. And so if you feel like you're part of that kind of struggle and in the rat race, I think there's a lot about finding the things that just make you feel that kind of feeling we were just talking about. Again, for me, it's reading or learning something or thinking about something new, thinking about the possibilities. Everybody's different, right? In terms of what is it for you that brings you that feeling of
Mm.
possibility and joy and excitement.
Mm.
And I think discovering that for yourself, that's just like this really special gift you can give yourself of learning that about
Mm.
you and what you love and like to think about and like to do. Um,
Mm.
so even if I get that we all have bills to pay and things that we have to be working on, I understand that. But I think there's also space for, what do I really like? What do I want to think about? What gets me, kind of feeling energized?
Mm. You find your fuel. Find your fuel, and
Yeah.
take the time to find your fuel. What you're curious about, um, what you, and maybe it's learning, maybe it's something else, but find your fuel in the midst of whatever's going on.
Yes.
And my sense is that then informs also how you lead.
Hmm.
My own experience is that we tend to get brittle when we're totally overtaken by the drivenness,
Yeah.
because it's all or nothing, as opposed to, no, I am this whole person. I bring this sense of contentment while I start the race or go in the race with you. But I'm content. Like, I'm not going to get pissy or frustrated, or like when things are over, like, or in disingenuous because I want to manipulate things. I have a sense of goodness within me that I will
Yeah.
bring to the situation.
Yes. I
Mhm.
love that. The wholeness, right? Like I am more than this job. I am more than this situation.
Yeah,
I am a whole person, and I have lots of other things I'm interested in. And I think you're right that then it's that perspective you get from thinking about yourself in that way is so much better than being so caught up in the one thing that's going to happen right now, right?
exactly, exactly. Laura, but getting towards the end of our conversation, a couple of things that I'm going to take with me from this conversation, and then I'm going to ask you to close, is one, this power of enoughness and appreciation, and acknowledging that, yes, there is a rat race, and many of us will need to be or are in it in some way. And yes, we have some choices along the way. Also, the importance of integrity and
Yeah.
listening and being willing to sit in the problems with people and be honest about that and create space for that. And then this listening to what fuels you, listening to what fuels you. So learning to be listening to what fuels you, and taking care of yourself so you can grow yourself to be always bigger than, like a, grow your container, so what's put into it becomes smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So maybe final words from you.
Yeah, as you're saying that, I really like the way you just said that. Um, there's a lot that's consistent between those ideas, right? The idea of listening to yourself and listening to other people and really being truthful about both of those, right? As much as you can. And again, I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I don't want anybody to think that. But like that integrity for yourself, for who you are, for the connection between your brain and your body, for like what you want and what you need. And then that same thing with other people, how you have that truth and integrity of really listening to other people. And if for leaders to then, take that step of taking action on that, right? Like, what can I do as a leader to really have an integrity driven relationship and connection with the people I work with?
Have an integrity driven relationship that consists of listening to yourself and to others with equal strength, Laura Hamill. It's been an enormous pleasure and honor to sit with you today, to learn from you. If you're listening to Rooted and Unwavering and you like this conversation, you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, etc. And you've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hylke Faber. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hylke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hylke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.
Yay!
Yay! That was so fun.
You're
You're really good at that.
As you are, Laura. I like how you can sail between all these different areas of the stratosphere, like of the very, very personal, all the way from launching a product, being a mom, to menopause, to being in the woods with your boat. It's